I've been there. No, please. Thank you very much for doing that. I hope you did take advantage of sharing that question. One of the things you just did is, in essence, you said a can-do statement for yourself. You have identified a learning target in that question. You are responsible for getting an answer to that question today. That's why you came. It may be in the keynote, it may be in a session you go to, it may be at lunch, it may be driving home with your colleague as you process the conference. But please, if that's a burning question, walk up to people and ask them, because that's how we're all going to help each other. So if you were, this morning I went to read a session and was actually changing the opening slide of the PowerPoint because your calendar made me feel better. When Jimmy first approached me about doing anything about digital natives, look, I'm old. I am as far removed from being a digital native as someone could be. I agree it's important, but it was the calendars that reassured me that some of the slides I had prepared were on the right track. Because if you look closely at that calendar, you're going to find technology in every picture. But what you're really going to find in every picture is that they want access to the world. So they've drawn the flag. They're saying, give me the skills to get out into the world. Yes, we don't want them to come into the classroom and have this reaction, if you can't read it in the back. How do you turn this thing on? This thing being a textbook. So obviously, we have to meet them where they are and use the tools that are available to us, or advocate seriously for the implementation of those tools if some of you are still in districts where administrators are banning cell phones. For example, you should know, if you are in such a school, that their professional organization says that is bad practice. So the next time they tell you what to do, you may want to go get a copy of their journals and show them what to do, because we've got to be in this together. This is a reassuring slide. You notice that what we have here are the cell phone, old versions, talking to an older version of a telephone saying grandma. But the purpose of the tool is communication. And the actual cell phone or old phone is useless without the skills to use it. And that is what we want to focus on today, which is building proficiency for these learners who are well into the 21st century. What do they need? What do 21st century learners need? It is not a set of facts. It is not, I'm sorry to say, my head too, the old grammar paradigm of language instruction. These are things that are readily available as facts. What they need is a sense of being open-minded. I'm going to post the PowerPoint so you can just relax. It'll be on I'll show you where it is at the end. They have to be open-minded. They have to be able to approach new situations, new learning, with a sense of inquisitiveness. They have to be able to use the skills we're giving them in the real world. These are 21st century skills. And maybe you can look at our political process, no matter where you are in that divide right now, and know that we've lost some of our ability to be open-minded, to analyze and reason and think through. That we're polarized because we're not reflecting on the past in order to lead us forward. That's the 21st century skills, and you gotta love them. We had the 5 goals, the 5 C's. If you followed the 21st century skill conversation, they came out with so many things we were supposed to be able to do. You know, that's just a little bit of an overachiever, and they distilled it to their 4 C's. What we really want students to be able to do, number 1, communicate. Our students today are losing some of that ability to communicate in face-to-face settings. So when we talk about our interpersonal mode, this is critically important because they're not always talking to each other. They're talking at a device to another person. And there's safety in doing that, in that I can't just look at someone and say the same things as easily. We want them to be critical thinkers and problem solvers. Unfortunately, we are handing future generations problems caused by our generations, and we're certainly hoping that they have the skills and the will and the desire to solve them. We want them to think creatively and out of the box. And that means we can't ask them to do what we've taught them to do. We have to ask them to apply what we've taught them to do. We got to get them to go further. So those skills, that last one, the ability to collaborate with others. My husband recently left a position with IBM where he worked with people in Mexico and in India on a daily basis in order to provide 24-hour coverage to companies in the United States. So how did he ever think of that? We lived for a year and a half in Puerto Rico because he was sent there to open a plant for a pharmaceutical company. So how do we know? He doesn't speak Spanish. He did learn a few things, cerveza, por favor, and things like that got him through the daily life of Puerto Rico. But mostly what he had was this skill set of being open-minded and willing to collaborate. So we just don't know what's going to happen for our learners. So those are the ideas that I want to bring today. So a little bit of the talk today is going to be some guiding principles from my career, a lot on proficiency, whether you want it or not, and then finally a couple of actual strategies for the classroom, hoping to touch everybody's question a little bit. But we may have differences of opinion in this room about how to teach languages. Raise your hand if you believe that statement to be true. You've had a couple of interdepartmental arguments. Raise your hand if that's true. You'd like to have a couple of interdepartmental arguments, but you haven't gotten there yet. But I believe that this picture, although I chose the picture of France, actually shares our common goal. If you would just turn, now this is a huge room, so this time you'll hear me counting down from 10, and as soon as you hear me, I want you to start counting down with me. But I want you to turn and share, why did I choose this picture as a common goal for language people? So if you have to stretch a little bit, that's good too. Okay, turn and talk. We've got 1 minute. You think I can move just for a minute? If I put them here, they won't be in the way. I know for the people at the front. Okay, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. So good. That's the way to get classes' attention and teach them to count backwards from 10 in every language in your room. That'll involve all of your heritage learners and speakers of other languages. It's an easy way to do it. I believe, and I don't have time to listen to your answers, I apologize for that, but I think this says we want them to get out there in the real world and use their language. If I have Latin teachers in the room, you can't understand that street scene if you don't understand a bit of our history. So it is this notion that we are teaching languages for a purpose beyond our classroom. Now, how we get them there, we're going to disagree on. But we can't disagree on our goal. I don't think there's anyone in the room that can disagree on the goal. And Sandra Savignon put it into a quote where she talked about how learning to speak another language is how we take our place in the human community. She's got some pretty powerful words. It means reaching out across cultural and linguistic boundaries. And that doesn't have to be in another place. I suspect it's in every town that you live in. There are cultural and linguistic boundaries within almost every community in the United States today, pockets of language. The next one is for the grammarians in the room. Language is far more than a system to be explained. It's true. That's how I learned my language. I took French in high school. I took French in college. After my junior year, I went abroad, and I said to myself as a non-native speaker of French, what language are they speaking? So I pretended that linguistic structure had prepared me and taught me my languages. But in truth, I've talked to enough people who will say, I learned my language when I went abroad. So if you are like me and your first experience in culture was a wake-up call for you, don't step back and say, but it worked for me, because it didn't work as well. So that's part of that quote. It's our most important link to the world around us. Without language, those cell phones, the old phones, are dead in the water. It's culture in motion, and it's people interacting with people. So from the moment they step into our classroom, we have to have that notion that this skill serves a far bigger purpose than any other skill they're learning. Language is the heart of who we are as a human. So what we do is vitally important. And we shouldn't be marginalized. We unfortunately are. And part of the reason we're marginalized is we've fallen into the American concept of it should be easy. Now, you'll date yourself, but how many of you remember Berlitz? It'll just make me feel better. Remember Berlitz, 30 minutes a day? Well, that was old technology. Now the Rosetta Stone has taken over. Rosetta Stone doesn't actually say in 30 minutes a day. They make it seem easier than that. Just buy it. Really, they don't even bother to tell you have to spend 30 minutes a day on it. You just buy it, and it happens. But you know, like Weight Watchers and some of the other weight loss programs that have been required by law to add a tagline that says, results not typical, the Rosetta Stone is also required by law to add that tagline, results not typical. But unfortunately, programs such as these have created a climate that says it's easy. It's easy. But then when you get into the class and you take it and it's not, you don't think something's wrong with the class. You think something's wrong with me. I can't learn language. We are the only discipline in the school that has that mentality against them. Even math gets more credit than we do. And yet, how many of you have used that advanced math you took? We have to sell ourselves, and so we're going to have to do a lot of work on proficiency, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Are there new teachers, first-year teachers in the room? Please stand up. Give them a round of applause. Great. Thank you. No, seriously, they just made the best decision they could make. They're on overload. They still took the time to write those lesson plans and come to a conference. When I got into supervision, I saw this chart, and I'm sure some of you have seen it before. And what it's talking about is the life cycle of a first-year teacher. But you know how you never read the headline? I just looked at the chart and said, that's me, and I think I was in year 25. Seriously, it took me a while to realize they were saying this is a first-year teacher. This isn't a first-year teacher. This is probably all of us, if we're being honest. So your conference is perfectly placed because you're well past that anticipation of the first year and survival, and now you're just down in the dumps. But you know, it's kind of nice to know that you're not there alone. The hard work and all of that is starting to just grind you down, and you're tired. So your conference is perfectly placed to give you that shot in the arm, because it's not long before you start to come out of it. The reason you come out of it is there's some days off. Thankfully. I mean, when you really think about it and you look at the cycle, rejuvenation occurs around spring break. So even if it's still snowing up here, it still helps. And then anticipation kicks in again. First-year teachers, I'm just going to let you in on a secret so you don't feel guilty. It's because by April, May, because you guys get out earlier than we did. We started August 3rd in Indiana. But by the end of the year, the anticipation is not for summer break. It's for starting with next year's students, because it's already too late this year. You heard the laughter. So first-year teachers, don't feel guilty. I swore I would stay in the classroom till I got it right. I would probably still be there. It is a really hard thing that we're being asked to do. So what we're trying to do here today is gain some of those strategies so that we feel more productive and we get out of the dip right away. And so really, I think Parker Palmer had it right in the courage to teach. It doesn't matter how long you've been at it. This is hard work. And when you walk into the classroom, if you are a good teacher, you feel like a beginner over and over and over again. Because every time you step into a class, the student body changes. And how many of you have taught a first hour class that went really well and a third hour class that bombed? And then you adjusted it for fifth hour thinking, I've got it right now, but somehow it still wasn't. So we just have to recognize that there is no one right way to do anything. And we're being bombarded with pieces of information. When I started teaching, everything that was on that screen, everything, including the standards, had not yet been published. In 1976, it was a textbook and you. That was it, which was maybe a blessing and a curse, because it would have been nice to have some information, but pick and choose. But the topic that we're talking about today, proficiency, has got to be a starting point. It really does. So of all the things that are up there, I would say that we can't do it all in a perfect state. That's why I like the definition of perfection. It doesn't say it's perfect. It says it's the act of trying to get there. It's doing lots of little things right. But if there's anyone in this room that's still under the illusion of perfection, that it's possible, please see Jimmy and do a session next year, because your colleagues will want to hear from you what the magic answer is. So there's really two key questions. Now, I'm not going to touch much on the what, but I have to, because that's my passion. It's the book that I co-authored with Donna. Yes, we spend a lot of time thinking about what we are going to teach, and that is critically important. And it's true that a long time ago the textbook was the what. And now as we're starting to recognize that we need to step back and really apply what we all learned in our methods classes, that the textbook is a resource, a tool, but it is not the curriculum. Or maybe some of you are saying, I don't even want a book. Wherever you are in this continuum, it's still, what do I want to teach? And this is a fundamental question that is a power question for you. You may not have thought about the power that this gives you within your setting. We do not have a national curriculum. It will come as a surprise to you, but nobody anywhere in the nation said that reflexive verbs in daily routine should always be taught in level 2. That is a made-up construct. It was a pattern for years and years and years. It's true that the camping vocabulary has often been in level 3. But why? Depending on where you live and who you are, it may be useless or of high interest to you, but it does not have to be taught. You are in control. So when teachers say to me, my curriculum won't let me, my answer to them is, who wrote your curriculum? There's only one answer. You did. Whether you were actually on the committee or not, there's no national or state curriculum. So it's absolutely up to you that what. But the question we've been forgetting to ask ourselves for too long is, how well should they do? And that's the one that the profession is really ramping up with the can-do statements, with the MOPI training, which if you can do it, because hands down the best professional training I ever had was when I took the OPI training. It was transformational. Curriculum, those units you write, should serve as a mirror. They should get to know themselves better. They should be able to talk about who they are and their interests. But you also get to know yourself better by getting to know others better. So it has to be both a mirror and a window to the world. Our biggest drop-off rate nationally is after 2 years of language in high school. If they drop after level 2, they will have nothing that's of use to them unless they know the world better. Think about that. I have never been asked to conjugate a verb in France. No one's ever come up to me and asked me to say the days of the week or count to 100 by 10. And I can pull all these examples off the top of my head because in my early years of teaching, that's exactly what I did. So what are we giving them? Can they find countries on a world map? This is a critical life skill. As a person who lives in Indiana, when Russia invaded the Ukraine, there was a survey taken, and people said that the Ukraine was near Ohio. The more they were likely to place the Ukraine in the United States, the more they felt we should go to war with Russia. I am not making this up. This was a legitimate USA Today survey. So think about the what, the mirror, the window. Are we exposing them to the world as soon as they walk into our room? Does our curriculum do that? Or is it egocentric and they've spent an entire year learning to say, I. We've got to get them out there. And so when Donna and I developed the book, we developed 5 key questions you should ask yourself. Can everybody think of a unit that they do not like teaching? And a unit is not grammar. A unit is a topic. Just think of a topic, any level, any grade level. You know, it's that one unit that if you had an opportunity, you'd chuck it and find something else. It might be because it doesn't deliver on one of these, and you might be able to improve it by just thinking through some key questions. Is that unit that you named in your head communicatively purposeful? By that I mean, thinking back to the street scene in Paris, are you teaching sentence and question frames that they'll use in the real world? I'm going to pick on the clothing unit because it's just notorious for bad examples. What color is her coat? Now, that's a legitimate question if I am colorblind. What is she wearing today? A legitimate question if I'm blind. Sometimes it's not the vocabulary that's the problem, it is the communicative context of the problem. So you have to think, how do I hear my age learner using these words in real life? And if the answer is I don't teach them. Don't bother with them. They don't need to know how to say rake the yard, especially if they live in the middle of a city and don't have a yard. Is it culturally focused? Is it culturally focused? Does it bring and infuse culture into it? It shouldn't be all about me. I should be seeing how others live, what their activities are before and after school. I can't talk about what time does school start. That's not a legitimate question. You all start at the same time. But I can look at a schedule from another country and talk about when do they start. So it has to have this cultural infusion. It needs to be interesting to the age of the learner. If anybody's planning on teaching chores this year, I respectfully suggest that you rethink that decision. Because I don't know about you, I have 2 children. I never overheard them talking in the back seat when I was driving around town with their friends and dropping them off at practice. Oh, did you make your bed this morning? Are you going to cut the grass tonight? When you can't hear the age of learner talking about it in the real world, it's going to fall flat in the walls of the classroom. And then finally, we've got to make it engaging to the age of the learner. The ABCs are elementary appropriate, but I freely admit that I made my high school seniors learn to say their ABCs in French. I even gave them a grade on it. True confessions. But over the years I realized, let's work on spelling your last name. Let's just take it a little bit at a time because, again, no one's going to say, hi, how are you today? Tell me your ABCs when they're adults. So we have to really think about that, and we anchor it with the standards. That is the what of teaching. So you get another minute to turn and talk. What idea did you just get out of those remarks? Or maybe you're getting mad. That's possible too. But get some of that energy out, and this time we're going to count backwards in my bad Spanish. So listen for me to start. Turn and talk. Because you all are such good learners, and that's what you want to do. You want your class to come back to attention. Now we do have those learners in the back of the room. If we could get those learners in the back of the room. Okay. I know you want to keep talking, but that's what lunch is for. So let's look at how well the proficiency, and there is no way to do service to proficiency this morning. So I really encourage you to take advantage of one of those institutes as you can, when you can. But there's two aspects to this proficiency question. There's performance and there's proficiency, and they are very confused in the profession. And the reason they're confused in the profession is they're both based on the proficiency triangle. We need to understand that, but more importantly, our learners need to understand it. So Rita showed the global document. You can't read this from here, and I'll make sure I put the 2 pages on the wiki so you have the direct link. But your learners right now should know where they are. They should be able to say, I think I am a novice high in and whatever mode you're looking at. Your parents should know what you're targeting for the year. If they don't, they're not understanding how we move our skill set forward. They're thinking of achievement as a good grade, and it's not. So look at these examples and target where are you going. When you give a task to your students, a real world task, that means it's something that you could foresee them doing beyond the walls of the classroom. So that's a performance. A performance would never be fill in the blank, because no one will ever be asked to fill in the blanks in the real world. But when you go to that next step and you ask them to do something, give a speech, have a conversation, write a blog, those are real world tasks. If you get multiple evidence of performance at intermediate low, you likely have intermediate low proficiency. But you can't just jump in and say you have it unless you're going to give some external testing measures to validate it, because you all are too nice. You know what you taught them, you know what to give them, and they'll do really well. But it's important to think in terms of tasks that lead to the real world. So it's performance toward proficiency. This is critically important because in my day, I did a lot of teaching. I'm teaching right now, and it's frankly kind of terrifying looking at this room with so many people so far back, because teaching, by Ruby Payne's definition, is what happens outside of the head. Have you ever had that unpleasant feeling that you're talking and nobody's listening? You were fully cognizant in that moment that you were teaching. Have you ever had a student say, we didn't do that last year? That's not so bad. How about, we didn't do that yesterday? How about this one? Quick, give me the test before I forget. Those are all evidence that a lot of teaching has been going on. But we're in a paradigm shift, not just in world language, where we want to move from teaching, which is like the referee in a sport, making a decision about do you know it or not, calling foul, and giving a grade. Marzano said, and this is really something to consider, good grades may motivate. Good grades may motivate. And you know what? We don't even like the students that are most motivated by grades because we have a very unflattering name for them. Grade grubbers. So we really have to think about the impact of grading. A whole nother conversation, as Rita said this morning. But a poor grade has no motivational value at all. How many of you travel abroad with students? How many of you have noticed that a C student may do better than an A student in the country? All right, when you think about your grade book, what's wrong with it? You just told me that the C student was better equipped to deal in the real world than the A student. Grades are an evidence of teaching and memorization often, when what we really want is that paradigm shift to learning, which Ruby Payne defines as, that is what happens inside the head. When you have truly learned it, you will not forget it. If you did any review at the start of the year, you are acknowledging that you taught things last year that you really don't think they've learned. And that's a waste of our time. So how do we put this emphasis on learning? Well, we start to get really good at what learning means. It means you can do something with it. And that is the proficiency levels, which it's in there. I'm assuming most of you have been exposed to it, and we're not really going to go through it. But from novice to intermediate, that would be so wonderful if we could get all of our learners into intermediate mid. If you can actually achieve that, they have survival language. We will never have Americans again who say, I took language and I can't do anything. Because intermediate mid means you can do something. But you have to start doing it right away. It can't be in 3 years you'll do it. You have to really build and push. If we can get them to advance, that would be wonderful, but we probably won't. Because that takes too long and it takes too much time. But it doesn't mean we can't push them for it. Push, 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 and know what those markers are. And that's going to be critically important for you all as you adopt the seal of biliteracy. You're always going to be thinking, I've got a low learner. How do I move them? If I've got a low learner, I've got to move them to mid, where they're really feeling like they've got it. They're solid. And then how do I get them to high, which is like that fallen angel. They almost made it to advanced, but they're just not quite there yet. These are the conversations you want to be having with your colleagues, not where do we teach the subjunctive. There is nothing up there about a grammar paradigm. It's really about what can you do with the language. You can achieve intermediate mid when you have the ability to handle a paragraph in one time frame. So we really have to understand this in order to be ready for your seal of biliteracy, because then the pressure is going to be on. You're going to have to prove it's going to be somewhat competitive, but it's going to be good for us. Because what we're really doing is starting to think about language like every other skill in this country. If you want to learn to be a baseball player, a soccer player, to play the piano, what do we know instinctively? Start early. Number one, start early. We have to start sending that message. When we put that little kid out there to play t-ball, we even vary the rules a little bit because they're not quite ready to hit a ball. So we got to put the ball on a stand, and even then, if you've gone to a t-ball, that doesn't guarantee success. And then they get a little better. And what is the coach doing? While my grandson is out there kicking his feet in the dirt, what's the coach doing? Is he freaking out? No, he's saying, good job. By the way, next time, you might want to. But eventually, they're becoming better and better. They're doing that because they are playing the sport. And along the way, they're being gradually coached. If the rule book was slammed down on the table in t-ball, then I'll leave. They're not going to learn a skill through the rules. It's immersion. It's your opportunity. If you are not a 90% plus teacher today, then what you do tomorrow is you go back and you pretend that you were invaded by aliens while at the conference. And they ripped out and took away your English voice. Because immersion for us is like swimming. You cannot learn to swim on the side of the pool. You have to get in the water with all of the scaffolds that you need, all of the comprehensible input, but you gotta get in the water. You're gonna flash and splash, and it's not gonna be fun, and sometimes your face is gonna go under and you're gonna come up spitting and crying, but somebody's gonna smile at you and say, you can do it, and you just gotta do it. So think about that if you're not doing it. I'm not even going into that. I'm not gonna have time, and I wanna get to the examples. Our curriculum is a spiral. We want things to get better and better and better. So you can teach anything you want at any level, as long as family moves all the way up from who's in this picture, describe them, up to a question like, what impact would stronger families have on our society? Or what is a tradition in your family and why is it worth keeping? Or what traditions will you start in your family because they will be important to you? Because maybe it's somebody that doesn't have any strong traditions right now in their family and they're thinking for their future. Family can be every level, but it cannot be, and by the way, that's another example of a communically impurposeful question. Do you have a mother? Biologically, I know the answer. You also have a father. Whether either one of them is in your life right now is a different question. So we have to really think about that. If we teach city vocabulary in the lower level, maybe it is just buildings in the city. You can't come back and do that a year later, but now you might be talking about where do you want to live, or more importantly in high school, where do you want to go to the university? Because that's a major decision. Will it be urban or suburban, and why? And then economic vitality. How can we improve the plight of our inner cities? So we take these topics. You don't have to fight over them. You just have to space them out. And everything that I just said is Paul Sandrock's slide. Know where your learner is and know what you're going to do to get them to the next level. I'm stopping there for a moment. If I have any upper level teachers or university teachers here who think that longer is better, I'd like to ask you to rethink that quickly. Do not require your students to write 3 paragraphs until they can write 1 paragraph well. Why bother? You're just grading more garbage. Think about it. It is the single solid paragraph that gives them intermediate mid. Then you need more paragraphs and more time frames to move into intermediate high. English freshman teachers are teaching students to still write paragraphs in native language. You've got to teach them to write a paragraph. So taking all this abstract stuff with a few minutes left, let me show you an example. Coming out of a food and hunger unit, I decided it's time to collect some evidence. I asked my students to describe a good meal. I made up 3 of these. They're not bad. I like breakfast. I eat with friends. I go to the restaurant. I eat eggs and bacon. I eat fruit and yogurt. On the weekend, I sometimes go to a restaurant with my family. We don't like fast food. We prefer a good meal. We usually have a salad, a main course, and a dessert. I really like salad, but I also love chocolate desserts. I went with my friends to a good restaurant for my birthday. It was fun. It was a restaurant where we had appetizers and shared food. I think we ordered 9 or 10 things. We spent 2 hours at the restaurant, and then we all went to a movie. And I think those are all decent. So the question becomes not what grade do I give it, but how do I improve it? And writing is a skill where you want to stop and really think about it. Because like all skills, you got to do it a lot. But then you'd like to have a life. So you can't pick up all these papers and grade them and give individual feedback. You're going to have to think, how can I still give this meaningful feedback and improve performance without killing myself? And I think we need to remember that assessment is when we sit beside the learner and coach them. We get into our coaching role. We look at this evidence and say, this is a novice mid. I got to get them to novice high. This is a novice high. I've got to get them to intermediate low. But I don't know about you, but my last class was 36 students after lunch. And I didn't have much time to sit beside all the students. And if I had sat beside one of them, then the other 35 would have been doing who knows what. So I'm thinking, I'm on one line of my performance rubric. I'm only going to work on this line of my performance rubric. And I'm going to bring these examples that I've selected back into class. So I collected my 36 papers, and I put 33 of them in recycling. Doesn't that feel good? And I saved 3 that I think I want to work with in the classroom, or maybe only 1. And I bring it back in, and I do what's called fat drafting. That's Deborah Dean's term. She did that in strategic writing, and I've adapted these, but it's a really good book on how to teach writing. So the one that's I Like Breakfast, you challenge them. Rewrite using fewer sentences and more words. You don't say use transition words, because how many times has somebody said that to you in the real world? Rewrite using fewer sentences and more words. Then you say, now with your partner or in your small group, let's improve this. Let's share this idea. That's the simplest one to use at the novice level, because they're not really having to do much more than add a few words. On Saturdays, I love to eat breakfast with friends at a local restaurant where I usually eat eggs and bacon and have a parfait made with fruit and yogurt. Same words, same ideas, fewer sentences, few more words, better sample. I'm teaching the process of writing. I'm pushing them up that level. Another fat drafting technique. A little bit more complicated. I promise the slides will be up there so you'll be able to read it. But it basically says, okay, I will model asking questions to get more information. And when I give you back your writing sample, you have to rewrite it to answer my questions. So I won't have every student rewrite their own, because then I'd have 36 papers to look at. I'll have every student rewrite the same one in small groups. And I could share the best one the next day. So my questions might be, what kind of restaurants does your family like? What do you usually order or avoid for the main course? What kind of chocolate desserts do you like? So I'm fat drafting it, because now they got to go back and rewrite it to answer my questions. Or the third one, when it got just a little bit better, underline the best sentence. Because now you might be suggesting the topic sentence of the paragraph. Place question marks next to 2 sentences where you want more information. Pass it back, fat draft it, work on the writing. And that's where we have to really think through in Proficiency. How do we become more and more intentional about moving them up the proficiency level without just allowing them to redo? Think about a coach swimming. You watch your swimmers. You need some help on your hand movements. They're slowing you down. You need a little help with your kick. You need a little help with your flip turn. I can't coach my students that way. Not when I have large classes and 150 students a day. We think we should, so we bear guilt. But what we really need to do is just work smarter about this and not harder, and build these strategies in. And I'm going to end with this quote and then take a couple of questions, but I picked this one for 2 reasons. I think about it for myself as a teacher. We can get stuck in our ways. Even last night, we were having a discussion, and we were bantering back and forth on some of the key issues going on today, and you can feel yourself stuck in your mindset. So I like Michelangelo's quote, inside every piece of marble dwells a beautiful statue. So sometimes I think we have to look at ourselves and say, hey, I'm a good teacher deep inside, but sometimes I'm going to have to let someone chip away at some of my deeply held beliefs. The paradigms, it's not my fault. I grew up with them. I've internalized them. They've worked for me. And if we just remove a little bit of it, it allows something else to come in. But I really, when I first read it, I'll be honest, I thought about my students. If you've ever had that one student that, just really drives you crazy, I want you to put this quote in front of you. Because deep inside, there's somebody that's worth saving. You can't do it all at once because you'll fracture the marble. what change can you make for that one student so that you can see the beauty in them? And little by little, we can chip away at it. If anyone in here, hopefully not, already has that class, you know, the one where you take a deep breath before you teach that one? I'd like to suggest to you that you apply this philosophy to that class when you go back. You already know that it's not quite working the way you want it. So when you get a good idea at one of these sessions and you want to try something out, go back, experiment, make that class your Michelangelo class. You have nothing to lose. So it's really the way to think about it. What have I got to lose? If I have a class that already isn't quite working, move forward and be that Michelangelo. So I want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart, because I believe that most of you are working far harder than I am these days. And I really, really, really appreciate all that you're doing to give your students the world that you see. And look at your calendar with fresh eyes when you think about your students. Yeah, they're holding the technology in their hands, they're looking at it, but they're asking for the world, and you have the power to give that to them. So thank you very much for your attention.